Hi everyone, I'm Susan Birch, the Health Detective, and welcome back to another podcast episode. Today, I want to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Andrew Crisp. And Andrew and I are going to talk a little bit about his health journey. We're going to talk about the parallels between me learning to market and maybe him and perhaps you learning to make changes in your nutrition and how you eat and your nutrition decisions. So there's a lot of parallels. Andrew, thanks for coming along. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
Hi, Sue. Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no, it'll be great. We got talking about doing this podcast because we were talking about why it's important to understand your why, why it's so important to know why you want to make these changes and to feel them and feel really passionate about them. And over the time that we've been, friends and working together, I've seen a huge change in your approach to your health and nutrition, and particularly more recently, you've had me banging on and you've listened to podcasts and, you've known the importance of it, but more recently, you really stepped into doing this for yourself. So before we go down that path, can you just give us a bit of background? I don't know, share what you want to share about your own health journey and where you've come from, and then we can talk about how you found your why and why that was so important.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm happy to do that. So, from a background and context point of view, for my entire adult life, I've been effectively overweight, at times obese as far as a BMI calculation goes. And I've always struggled. I've always been a bit of a yo-yo dieter, nothing too serious, but certainly, knew that I had to lose weight, and the old ways of, calorie restriction and that sort of thing for somebody that loves their food simply was not going to ever work. So I've wasted a lot of time and a lot of energy and disappointment into that sort of yo-yo style of dieting. And I guess when I look back, I really did pile on the weight. I think the worst, if you like, if we're talking about obesity and some of the health effects, then it is definitely, the worst I've been is 112 kilograms, and I'm 178 centimeters tall. So, a quick BMI calculation, and I'm was well and truly into the obese range. I sort of dropped 4 kgs. I was sort of around 104 at some stage, not so long ago, and then I was back up to 107, 108. And it was about probably 2.5 years ago that I had the fortune to become a village manager in a retirement village. And part of the village manager's role was to facilitate activities in the village, and also get to know really well the residents. And you got to know them, really, really well. Every week we had, some activities which I would regularly organise or run, and we had outings, etc. But we also had a health clinic, which was once a week, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. And that health clinic was there for residents to come along and, get a blood test, as far as that, or it can extend to a blood test, like a physical blood test, but also blood pressure monitoring, talk about the medications that they're on, and measure their heartbeat, all the vitals and that sort of thing, and any ailments or sickness they could certainly voice at that time to a registered nurse. So as a bit of a lark, I participated in those sessions, and I very quickly came to find that my blood pressure was well and truly elevated at around 155/90, which really gave me a scare. And compared to some of the residents, as a village manager, I was privy to some, not all, but some of the top line, medical results, because sometimes, a doctor referral might have been required, or at least try and urge the resident to call their doctor and have a conversation. But I realized that I was actually edging up pretty high and pretty close to these people in their 70s, 80s, and in some cases 90s. And that had me worried. And the village environment is pretty much old school nutrition. We used to have lunches, which as a village manager I would attend, and it was your cakes and your biscuits and your sausage rolls and your pastries, your sauces, and if you were lucky, a side salad, which would have been pasta. And if you were really, really lucky, it would have been a green salad. And so, I was sitting there, not being judgmental, but just looking around and absorbing what these people were traditionally eating. And at the same time, so of course, listening to your podcasts and interviews and reading your materials, and it just got me thinking that actually I need to make a significant change. I felt also that I was probably on the verge or pre-diabetes, just because of my girth and sluggishness during the day. It really got me thinking, I want to live longer, but healthier. I don't want to be living longer and with ill health. So there was only one way really that I was going to be able to address that. So I'm 55 years of age. I was pre-diabetic, 155/90. I had a new doctor after moving into the Bay of Plenty. So I went along to the doctor and asked the doctor for a set of tests. And to my surprise, really, there was no conversation around why I wanted the tests. He was quite happy to dish out the tests. I guess he knew enough to, take an educated guess as to why I was asking. And then some of those tests came back, less than optimal, shall we say? And it was then that it was time to really think very seriously about how I wanted to live the rest of my life. And that was really spurred on, as I say, with the retirement village environment. So, that's where the journey sort of began. And then from there, I've been working particularly hard at the nutrition and dietary side of things, knocking alcohol pretty much on the head and hydrating, more than I was before, and also eating, nutrient-rich foods, and and really just getting a real handle on the dietary side of things.
So can you explain the mindset shift? And I know that that's probably not that easy, and I understand, you were in the retirement village environment and you could see what was happening to people as they aged, and you decided you didn't want that for the rest of your life. But can you describe kind of how that felt? Because I think a lot of us go, well, we want to live health, we want to age healthily, we want to, be able to do things, have good cognition, not be on a whole raft of pharmaceuticals. But how do we connect that How do we connect that into this really strong feeling inside of ourselves that, really what you're talking about is having a guiding light, so that your previous attempts where you would fall off the wagon, you'll go back to what you had been doing, you'd lose some weight, you'd have an intention, and then you'd drop off again, and then you'd start again, that yo-yo dieting. Do you have any way of describing that difference and how people can find that actual difference for themselves? Because I think that is so essential to this process.
Well, I think, staring old age in the face, literally, for 12 months in a retirement village, it almost should be a mandatory placement for people to really understand what the future can and for many of us will hold. The retirement village that I was in, it was a retirement village of relatively healthy people, but we also had a care home and a dementia ward and a secure dementia ward as well. So we had the full gambit of illness in old age. And I guess for me, what it was initially, the aha moment was really just, that initial blood pressure result. And that led me into a journey of really just exploring the science. So doing quite a deep dive actually into your material and into, some doctors in the US around, the latest science.
Yeah.
Around things like the keto diet and similar, diets such as the carnivore diet, and getting to understand the science. And I think for me, and it will be different for others as well, once you understand the science and work that through in your mind, and after you've watched, a number of these sort of interviews and commentaries from, medical professionals, it does start hitting home. And probably I'm fairly unique in the fact that because I resigned I did a year stint at the retirement village, and then I moved on and I started working out of the Hawke's Bay for 8 months. And that was a fly in, fly out type arrangement. So I was doing a lot of my own regulation around food intake and exercise and that sort of thing. So that it allowed me to, basically plan my week and really bulk down what it was that I would eat in a day. And I'd pretty much have everything planned out. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. I knew in advance what I was going to be eating. And it was really proteins, fats, and green leafy vegetables. That was really what made it up. And so for me, I had the best of all worlds. I had the exposure to old age and some of the complications. I had the opportunity to really explore the science, and then I had the opportunity to actually, in effect, isolate myself and basically knuckle down and get my diet sorted. And that was the sort of the whack on the side of the head that I required, which sort of led to a complete change in the way that I looked at food. I no longer looked at food as just simply something to fill me up, but I looked at it as a way of fueling the body, and then looking at all the different ailments that that would come if you weren't fueling your body in the right way.
Really?
So yeah, so I did have a somewhat I guess unique sort of journey, if you like, into where I am today, which made it a lot easier. Now, what I would say is when I came home at weekends and that sort of thing, we'd have a bit of a splurge, which is probably not ideal, but again, that brings in the importance of other people living in the same household, getting them on the same page and thinking about their own nutrition and respecting, your want, to live a healthier life and to eat more nutritious food, is really important. If they're not on board, it makes things a little bit more difficult. But I must say, my wife Fran and I really have, we've really embraced a completely different lifestyle.
I was going to ask you about that, how important the people around you are in the journey. How easy is it to be distracted and drawn off track based on, the people that you're around? Is there a difference between how you respond now and then how you would have responded, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, most of the time. I say most because, you turn up at a family member's, for lunch, and, they've gone to the trouble of doing some baking, and, you just feel that it would be rude to say no for that star biscuit or sausage roll or whatever it may be. So sometimes, you just got to relax into it and just know that, okay, one meal's not going to cause a big change, but 2 meals in succession will. So, let's just keep it real.
Never miss twice is the motto.
Yep, exactly. And, and that works. It doesn't work all the time. I'll still go to my mum's and refuse a biscuit with a cup of tea, quite happily. And she respects that. Other people, they really are quite insistent that you have that biscuit for whatever reason. And it's the same when you go out, with alcohol and that sort of thing. I might have a glass of red wine, but I won't have a second. And it's more of a social interaction. I was just drinking water when I went out, but now I'm sort of I've lost 20 kgs. I feel that I'm no longer in that position of vulnerability and yo-yoing, and I can get right back onto the right track very quickly. So I can afford to have a glass of wine or a cheese scone at a cafe, etc., and not feel that I've lost the plot. You just turn a page. Sometimes it still sneaks up on you. I mean, highly processed foods are incredibly addictive.
Oh,
they're designed to be addictive.
Yeah.
So you can't blame yourself for indulging and then feeling this craving for another shortbread biscuit.
Yeah. And then you have, or many people then go, okay, I've buggered it, I've stuffed it now, I've wrecked it, or I may as well give up. I can't do this. This is too hard for me. I'm too addicted to these foods. Rather than what you were just saying is never miss twice. Like, okay, so, I do that. I go to my kids, or, my daughter-in-law is a great bakers, and my daughter, and, and I go and I thoroughly enjoy what they've created, have a glass of wine, or, have a cup of tea with them or something. But it never occurs to me that I'm going to go home and not just get back onto what I normally eat. And then that way, that is a real treat. Like, you really do enjoy it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a treat. And I do enjoy, I haven't got a sweet tooth necessarily. I'm lucky enough to really like savory food, which really leans towards the keto side of things. But I still have a shortbread biscuit with a cup of tea if that's the opportunity, and it feels okay at the time. I guess snacking, and to me, those sort of morning tea, afternoon tea, and dare I say it, supper, which I don't indulge in, that snacking habit, it's such a habit. And for me, it's not about replacing those snack times with anything else. I just don't do them. There's no point in snacking. If I've had a decent breakfast, for example, or a lunch or a dinner, I shouldn't need any more snacks. And one thing that really, I think for me, looking back, is actually waking up in the morning feeling genuinely empty and hungry.
Yeah.
Now, to some people, they'll go, oh, I wake up and don't feel that way really. I just am in automatic mode. So I go for the breakfast, say cereal or whatever. And because that's habit. But I can get up now and feel very hungry and know that actually the previous day has provided me with the, I've gone to bed full or just on that verge of being hungry, woken up very hungry. And that's really how, I've been wanting to live my life. Whereas before I was definitely waking up and habitually going for the breakfast, although I was still full from the night before.
That's really interesting, actually. I think that's well worth pondering on, is that feeling of you're not hungry, but you're going to eat anyway. But I just wanted to raise the question of time-restricted eating with you and intermittent fasting, because you and I had a bit of a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and, adding in some intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating was a game changer for you when your weight had plateaued. So I'm really curious to hear, how that went for you and what you did. But I just want to put the caveat out there for people who are listening to this. You need to make sure that you are fully fat adapted before you start doing that. And it does depend. Men do much better at it than women. So I just want to put that out there. And especially for younger women who are cycling extreme fast. I'm seeing so many women doing 48 hours, 72 fasts, then talking about doing 10-day fasts and things like that. And it's all about losing weight, but not really being aware of all the physiological mechanisms that can be happening underneath that. But anyway, I'd love to hear your experience and how that helped shift you through your weight loss plateau.
Yeah. Well, I try and eat in a sort of an 8-hour window.
Yeah.
That's not religious by any stretch, but it's something that I try and abide to, and it really is. It's not luck of the draw, but it is somewhat by design.
Yeah.
To be able to achieve that. Sometimes possible, sometimes not. But I always aim to wake up in the morning hungry. And I guess for me, that intermittent fasting, it's driven now by me feeling hungry, not just because it's 12:30 and it's lunchtime.
Yeah.
So I can stop eating at 6 o'clock the night before, and I can wake up in the morning. I'm feeling hungry. The first thing I do is hydrate, maybe some good old apple cider vinegar, which seems to work for me. Pop a few vitamin pills, which, rightly, wrongly, whether they're doing the trick, it just feels good. And then I'll sort of like push sometimes breakfast out till 10 or 11. Yeah. I work from home, so the ability to be able to control that is quite easy, because I can simply go to the cupboard at 10 or 11 and pull out an avocado and get some eggs and cook up a feed, which may not be possible in a working environment. But that I sort of undertake the fasting side of things when I feel that I've sort of plateaued, which at the moment I'm at 88/87 kgs.
Well done.
My goal was 85.
It's brilliant.
So between now and July, the beginning of July, the aim is to slowly but surely just, there's no big stress around it. But the aim is to continue to drop in weight and, physical measurements down to that 85 or below. And at 88/89 kilograms at the moment, it's the lightest I've been since I was about 18 or 19.
Wow.
So, big change. So intermittent fasting does have an effect. It just gives me that extra sort of tool to stay up, to get off that plateau and continue on the downward trend weight-wise.
So let's talk about the food, because it was great. You talked about avocado and eggs and things like that. And one of the problems people have when they're going to change their nutrition is, what am I going to eat? How am I going to eat that? I had a email from a client the other day saying, like, I feel fantastic, everything's going really well, but I'm bored with the food. And I remember a few years ago having a client who said to me, I'm so over eating salad, but she would eat the same cereal with the same low-fat yogurt for breakfast every morning. She'd have the same cheese sandwich for lunch every day. And yet, you know, oh, I'm so over eating salad. So, you know, how do we get our head around the changes in food, cooking that food, buying that food? You know, you and Fran are on the same page, so that's fantastic. And I know you guys take a week about cooking, and, you know, and you both got the same goals and same ideas. But, you know, any thoughts for someone, you know, in a family situation, or where people are going, oh, I don't want to do that, or people who just feel like they don't know how to cope with cooking a low carb meal?
Yeah, well, I think repetition, meal repetition in the beginning is for me was the key to, you know, kicking this off. And that was the fact that I would have it planned out. So I'd have, you know, I might have, you know, let's say eggs for breakfast, and it would be an omelette with cheese or something like that, some avocado on the side. For lunch, I might have some grilled chicken or roast chicken or poached chicken, whatever the chicken was, you know, that was lunch. And it might be a chicken breast with, again, some avocado and a salad and maybe some tomato and that sort of thing. And then for dinner I'd have maybe I'd go Japanese, and I'd get some sashimi by, you know, buying a fillet of salmon, fresh salmon from the supermarket, cutting that up, and I might have that over 2 days, where I, you know, have some that evening for dinner with maybe some good quality wasabi and some soy sauce, and then in the morning I might you know, gently fry some of that up to have with an egg omelette again, or just, you know, the egg and the salmon together. But it was about just picking foods that were really simple,
Yeah,
nothing complicated at all. And it was, you know, it was protein, fats, vegetables.
Yeah.
And the vegetables religiously, mushrooms, Brussels sprouts, beans, broccoli, cauliflower, stir-fried, maybe some cloves of garlic in the stir-fry, or some ginger, you know, some salt and some pepper, and, you know, give it a good fry in some good quality fat like coconut oil or something like that, and then stick the lid on, let it steam, and you can eat as much as that as you like. You know, it keeps you, you know, keeps you full, keeps you feeling that you've had a decent meal. And I think now when I walk into a supermarket, I can just walk past so much of that produce in the supermarket and not even glimpse. Or if I am, I'm, you know, in my mind, you know, probably being overcritical about the placement of, you know, something at the end of an aisle or something like that, because of the awareness, you know, the awareness factor. So, I mean, the key thing in the beginning, as I say, for me, repetition of meals, keep it simple, real simple. For other people in the household, you may supplement, you'd have the same base protein, etc., but instead of tipping the sauce over the chicken and the vegetables, as an example, you might, you know, keep your portion to one side, or you only have, you know, a very measured 2 teaspoons or tablespoons of sauce, just to keep it real. But yeah, I mean, Fran didn't like Brussels sprouts, but I've found a way now of cooking Brussels sprouts where she really enjoys them. So instead of having a dead old, you know, boiled Brussels sprout. There's something which is a little bit more palatable. And yeah, that's, I think, the key. I would not want to be doing this with children, though. I think with kids, they're a little bit more, or can be, fussier eaters. And, depending on how much processed foods they've had in their diets or what they're used to food-wise, you might battle. So, in your mind, it's just, providing them with a good, nourishing, meal, but knowing that from your perspective, it's not necessarily the keto or the flavor of, regime that you want to follow. Yeah. And
I guess if you're in a family situation, you decide what you put on your plate and what you eat as well. So, you can cook the potatoes and the starchy vegetables and the rice and those kinds of things for the kids. And, you choose not to eat them or to keep them to a real minimum.
Keeping them to a minimum is not so much of a challenge as not having them at all. But you need to recognize your own strengths and weaknesses around that. A mushroom pasta sauce, that you've made from scratch, can be very tempting. So, yeah.
I do wonder, for people who, you and I both work from home, there's just you and Fran, there's just me. So we have those opportunities to, cook what we want, eat what we want, when we want. But, if you've got a family, young family, you're working 40 hours, you've got to come home, you've got to get kids home from school, get them to sports, get their homework done, get them off to bed, can certainly understand, the struggles and how tired you are, that constant tiredness. And I've been there. I mean, I raised 4 kids and we had a few extra, extended family kind of living with us for a long time. So I really understand that. So do you have any suggestions for, how people can kind of stay on track in those more challenging circumstances? I think this brings us back to that why again, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you've cemented your why, I think that's, that is really a large component of success, and just remembering why you've made this lifestyle choice. For the others in the family, if they're younger kids and burning off carbs and and certainly haven't got the potential, well, everybody's got the potential of health ailments, but realistically, kids eating broccoli or cauliflower, certainly in my household, of years gone past, that was not going to happen. However, as young adults, they're into their vegetables and things now. But yeah, I think even if you took turns in cooking, if you were the traditional cook in the house, and you shared some of that responsibility and just maybe carved out your meals and kept them to one side, that would certainly help. I mean, there's nothing worse than standing there cooking something that you can't have. And that's probably the toughest, is actually the preparation of the meals. So yeah, that would be one way around it.
And I mean, kids can get away with a lot. Kids have a lot of growth hormone, so sometimes they still grow and things still work okay for them, despite the fact that they may not be having an optimal diet, which when we get older, we don't have that growth hormone. So we've got to make sure we've got that protein and those good quality fats coming in. Otherwise, our health suffers. But we are seeing an enormous amount of overweight and obesity in our young people these days, and explosion in type 2 diabetes in children. And, this gives us an opportunity you know, maybe to have those conversations in the family, and, you know, maybe we could engage the kids and our children into, you know, why we want to eat properly, you know, what do they see for their lives in the future? I mean, I think those are good questions to ask, you know. You start, you know, you begin with the end in mind, you know, just like you said, how do you want to be when you're 70 or 80 or 90? I know that when I was quite young, I went to an old folks' home with a friend, and I remember feeling absolutely appalled and sick, and in the corridor were beds with people, old elderly people on them, and there was one lady, and honestly her legs were about the size of my arms, and she seemed like she was so old to me because I was still only a teenager. And, you know, everybody seems old, and she, as we walked past, she's got a hand out going, help me, you know, and I didn't know what to do. I sort of, you know, went to go and talk to her, but I didn't know if I should do that. And I was actually really frightened. I was really, really frightened. And I still remember that. And I remember thinking when I got out of there, no way do I want to be like that when I'm old, you know?
Yeah, it really is quite confronting. Not only is it confronting at the time, but it really makes you start, you know, looking at other people around us, and it's easy to become a little bit judgmental. But you know, understanding that what you understand is not necessarily what they understand or even really want to entertain. I had a conversation with an older person just this weekend, and was shut down very quickly. And I was just talking generally about nutrition and protein. And as we get older, our bodies don't absorb the same amount of protein as easily. So we need to lift our protein. And before I was able to finish my sentence, I was promptly cut off. And I just thought, well, this obviously is a message that the rest of the family are potentially trying to get through as well, because that both of them work in a medical profession. Right. So you know, it's difficult. You know, it's difficult to get others to immediately get on the same page, even through my own experience. You know, it wasn't until I had that moment of thinking, you know, I'm on a slippery slope here, metabolically. You know, I'm in the big risk circle. The flashing lights are flashing, and I need to do something about this, otherwise it'll be too late. And as I said before, you know, I genuinely believe I would have been pre-diabetic and certainly on a downward spiral. So I mean, I've lost 20 kgs. I know where I've lost some of the weight on my body, but what possibly is the most alarming thing is I know that a lot of that weight that I've lost has actually been internal. It's not around the gut necessarily. Like my stomach has definitely got slimmer and really become quite concave where the fat is come away. But I do worry about how much fat internally I've lost, because there must have been a hell of a lot of it.
And that's the real, you know, and especially for 55-year-old men, you know, that's you're on a highway to a hiding, really, if you don't start taking notice and doing something about it. Yeah,
and I guess as a 55-year-old male with, you know, regular interaction with medical practitioners, you know, unless you have an aha moment as a 55-year-old male, the chances of you changing your ways and actually, you know, seeing what the future is going to hold is actually quite slim. You know, my doctor is, I stick with, hopefully he's not watching this, but I stick with my doctor for the simple fact that he does what I tell him.
Yeah.
And that is, I tell him that I want these tests, and 9 times out of 10, he doesn't question me and he writes out a prescription. He has 15-minute appointment intervals. And within 10 seconds of the start time, I'm walked in, and within 30 seconds of the end time, I'm walked out, and he's on to his next patient. When he learned that I'd lost 20 kilograms, he never once inquired how.
Well,
and he didn't really ask why.
He probably knows how, and he probably knows why, but maybe it's too confronting, because I mean that's a whole discussion in itself, is where our medical system, how our medical system is kind of medicalizing obesity and type 2 diabetes, which are just really lifestyle diseases. And you sent me that link yesterday with that interview about the clinics in Auckland, and I did a bit of a rant on it on Facebook yesterday. Probably too long a rant, but it had me really going. And we've got a meal replacement, low carb meal replacement, made up of what I guess they put a few vitamins and minerals in they think might be necessary. A 12-week program for weight loss, the option of the new drugs, the new obesity drugs out there, the GIP and GLP-1 and antagonists, and no mention about the side effects of taking those things. Just these are all hormones that we make in our body, kind of thing. No mention of taking them in a pharmaceutical form of what happens then. And then all this talk about wraparound services, which sounds beautiful and touchy-feely and lovely, and psychologists and health coaches. But what can you do in 12 weeks? You'd been on your journey for how long, Andrew? And you're a smart, intelligent, capable person who's been exposed to this for a long time. What are we going to do with people over 12 weeks? And then my question was, how are we going to measure results? Are we going to measure how much weight they lost at the end of 12 weeks? Or are we going to go 2 years down the track and say, how much weight did they keep off? Are they off all their drugs? What's happened to the rest of the family? Are they also making progress?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately, I predict it will be a failure. And, 12 weeks is just nothing in somebody's lifetime if you're trying to instill and change habits. It's just not fathomable that is going to happen, especially in the communities that they're targeting, where the family environment and the peer pressure around food, alcohol, as well as potentially their ability to purchase and cook healthier foods may not be possible. It is just a waste of taxpayers' money. Which is really unfortunate for the participants, because I'm sure a lot of them, have high hopes of making a change, but will be, and I hope not, but I would project that a majority of them will be very disappointed at the end.
And we have a few medical professionals and other professionals who hold themselves up as being, they get prestige, earn a lot of money doing this, and like you say, there's no real payback for the taxpayer at the end of the day.
No, there's not, and certainly for the participants, it's yet another disappointment in their health, and wanting to make change and just not finding a way of making change. I mean, it must be a very, very traumatic experience, for those with those severe eating habits.
And we're not doing anything to change our food guidelines. We still have this hate on red meat, this vilification of any animal products, and people are encouraged to go out and And I'm seeing, you know, some of my old professors from Otago University going out there now, complaining about food companies and things, but the food companies have only followed the trends in the market. They're only producing what we ask them to produce. If we buy it, they're going to keep making it. And, you know, these people like Jim Mann and Boyd Swinburne, they need to take some responsibility for the food guidelines, the fact that they keep pushing these toxic seed oils, and they keep pushing, eat your Weet-Bix and your low-fat milk and have a drink of juice and a piece of fruit for breakfast. I mean, these are just diabetes, obesity guidelines that you know, we're being encouraged to follow. You can't blame people when they follow them and then they get sick.
Well, I mean, I think from a food perspective, living here in New Zealand, we are very fortunate to have, you know, an abundance of quality foods, especially things like grass-fed beef and free-ranged pork, free-range chicken, and that sort of thing. You know, there's a big difference to what the meats that we eat here in New Zealand compared to, say, the United States. Mm-hmm. So my experience in the States would have been completely different in the supermarkets to what it is here. Mm. The meats are all pre-packaged, they're coloured, and you know they're there for visual appeal to the consumer. At least in New Zealand, you'd like to think that our vegetables and things are a little bit more nutrient dense, just in the way that, you know, we grow our vegetables here in the ground. They're not hydroponically grown. In the States, I don't know, I've got no scientific sort of basis to say one way or the other, but my personal feeling would be that, you know, it's about throughput, it's about visual appeal, and, you know, it's about ease of getting something to market. So if you don't grow something in soil in a natural environment, then you can have control over those three things and get something to market very, very quickly by accelerating the growth, for example, of a broccoli. You know, if a broccoli sits in your garden for, you know, a month and a half before it's harvested, that would be, I'd suggest, again, I have no evidence, but it just feels that would have a better nutrient density to something that's been hydroponically, you know, basically designed to grow in a significantly less period and look bright green, and not have any requirements around, you know, brushing it down or washing it off the dirt and that sort of stuff. You just basically cut it off at the stem and off it goes to market.
I think they do put nutrients into the mixture, but again, we're looking at something that a man decides is, or a person, I'll say a person, make sure I get that right. Something that a human being decides is the right mix to go into that particular plant. And, you know, that's the same with the supplements. And that's why I really like food-based supplements, you know, organ supplements and supplements that are made from real foods, not where some human being has decided, well, we're going to put this much zinc and iron and copper and vitamin D into this concoction.
Well, it'll be really interesting to know what that hydroponic concoction is actually made up of, because when you think about a plant's requirements for growth, you know, there are certain elements that are required in order for that plant to start growing and flourish, and that may not necessarily need you know, zinc, copper, you know, beyond the actual seed initially. And plants tend to be quite devoid of a lot of those things anyway, or the nutrients come packaged in a way that we can't digest them and break them down. You know, vitamin A is a classic example where, you know, it's a precursor to vitamin A, it's beta carotene, and, you know, we have to eat kind of a kilogram of carrots a day to be able to convert enough into the retinol that we need. But people don't understand that, so that can be challenging.
And I was just going to mention a friend, a mutual friend of ours, Gay, and I know she won't mind me talking about this, but, you know, Gay had her hip surgery 3 weeks ago tomorrow, I think. And, you know, we're talking about the medical system and the doctors and things like that. And she had a fantastic experience at the hospital. Everybody was wonderful. The surgeon was amazing. But when she came out of surgery, she was fed orange juice. She was told you're allowed to drink juice, ginger beer, tea, or coffee, but you're not allowed to drink water. And the juice, so she was extremely thirsty. She drank copious amounts of juice. She drank 2.5 liters of juice in about 12 hours. And was quite violently ill, probably with a mixture of all the medications they stick you on as well. And when I brought it up, I was told that, no, that's the protocol because she can't have water because of her electrolytes. And I said, well, why not just put a teaspoon of electrolytes in her water? You know, if you're worried about her sodium, or put it in her IV bag, you know, but just put some electrolytes in her water. Anyway, I ended up, there's no point having the discussion with the nurses, so I ended up having a discussion with the anaesthetist, and, you know, we ended up shaking hands, and he said send him some information, which I did, but he hasn't acknowledged that he's received it. But in that orange juice, Gay was fed 65 teaspoons of sugar. She had 125 milligrams of sodium. And a teaspoon of an electrolyte mix should have no sugar and 125 milligrams of sodium. And, you know, he didn't even seem to know that there's, you know, 3 grams of sodium in a cup of coffee and none in a cup of tea, and virtually none in ginger beer. You know, and we've got this going on in our hospitals throughout the country.
Yeah, and it's, I guess, another example of that, you know, in the hospital situation, you know, they'll be abiding to a budget per person. They won't want to necessarily restrict. I think that, you know, fruit juice is seen as a positive thing as well. So it's palatable, and it's, you know, everybody drinks fruit juice. So, you know, it's something they can buy in bulk. It keeps for a long time in the cold store. They can dish it out when they want it all, you know, again, and I don't want to sound overly cynical, but, you know, again, it comes down to the dollars and cents. And, you know, when you've got budgets.
A bottle of electrolytes from somewhere like BioTrace, and I'm sure they'd do a deal with hospitals around the country. I can't see that that's going to cost more per patient than giving them fruit juice.
No, but it's and just as a complete sort of aside, you know, the procurement of that is yet another supplier, another product line they've got to manage, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not necessarily the value of the actual material that they're purchasing, or the food type. You know, there's a whole lot of other factors that, you know, if they can rationalize their supply chain and get bid food to back a truck up, unload all the seed oil based sources, which make everything taste so nice, in one hit, bang, thanks for coming, one invoice, one supplier, you know, and it's life's easy for the procurement and purchasing department.
And health has nothing to do with it, you know. And, you know, I find it frustrating, you know, my father-in-law, when he was in hospital, you know, he's a diabetic, and he's been fed, you know, fed a high carb diet. And when I said, well, you know, why has he been given this? He's a diabetic. And they're just like, oh, well, you know, it's fiber and cereal, and, you know, it just.
Well, I guess just picking up on what you said there about, it's nothing to do with nutrition in regards to these food supply chains. I mean, reading through the Nestle end of year report, which, I just flicked through just out of interest. I was actually looking for something completely unrelated, and this PDF popped up, and I thought, oh, I'll have a flick through that, spend a couple of minutes, which I did, and it was quite clear. I don't think the word nutrients or healthy foods actually factor into anything that report, which is a financial report, was focusing on. It was purely focused on demand from consumers in highly populated areas where they could turn a profit. And that was very, very clear. There was nothing to do with nutrition. And when you looked at some of their strategies and methods for entering new markets, again, it wasn't analyzing what nutritional value was missing in the food chain and how they can plug it. It was identifying the cheap, crappiest foods that they could manufacture and pump into in the case that really stood out for me, into a developing nation. And I've seen that firsthand in India. So I traveled for business backwards and forwards to India for what must be 20 years until recently. And, during that time, I saw the likes of KFC, McDonald's, Subway, Pizza Hut, some sort of chicken franchise, whether it was Red Rooster or otherwise, start opening in these centers. And there was a huge change in, just the size of the kids in the streets. Just really shocking. And, in India, from a cultural perspective, and I guess from a socio-economic perspective, if you're going to eat in a McDonald's, then let's just say it would be like us going to the French cafe in Mount Eden in Auckland. There's some stature, that comes with that, the ability to spend $300 or $400 in equivalent, New Zealand dollars on a meal at the French cafe. I mean, you'd get a really good meal. But in India, you might spend, let's say, 2 or 3 days' wages by taking the family out for a meal at McDonald's, and it's a status thing, or it was. So and the other, I think I think the most nutritious and well-researched product that someone like Nestle would manufacture is probably dog and cat food.
Because they've got to meet nutritional standards to supply dog and cat food.
Yeah, they do.
It's against the law not to meet certain nutritional standards.
Yeah, and they make a big song and dance about it on the side of the packets about how nutritionally dense, a cat or dog biscuit is, and all the various different vitamins and minerals that it contains. They don't do the same for. I've never seen a Nestle food product that overtly promotes the health benefits for the individual by taking this chocolate shake or these noodles or this 2-minute rice. It just doesn't exist. I mean, I'd be happy to be proven wrong, by the way.
Well, I mean, that makes it very challenging for people. And that brings back to, I think, what you were saying in the beginning about knowledge. You needed to get educated. So, you had the people like me and other, other influencers banging away in your ear, but you actually needed to go and get some knowledge and understand about insulin and carbohydrates and fat and then that made it easier to make the next decision about what you're going to eat. No, I definitely did. I mean, I bought and again, I didn't buy these things to get a scientific exact reading, but why I bought these things was to give me a bit of a benchmark. Yeah.
You know, so for example, a set of scales,
Yeah.
and I don't really care if the scales are 2 kilograms out.
Yeah.
As long as every time I jump on those scales, it's not every time, sorry, that's wrong. As long as I know where I am from a benchmarked point of view, whether that weight is right or wrong, I know where I've come from and I know where I've been. Same with a blood pressure monitor, a home one. You know, I took my blood pressure today before this interview, and I was 113/80.
Wow, that's
which is great, you know, which is where you know I'd like it to be. And that was the other thing. Historically, I was 120/80 religiously. You know, it was only in the last couple of years that my blood pressure really started, you know, going up. As far as insulin resistance, as I say, I'm pretty sure that I was pre-diabetic. I've been for a few tests. I have a home testing kit. Again, I'm not expecting an exact scientific result out of the kit, but what I am expecting is to see a general trend, whether it's going up or whether it's going down, and that to me is good enough. You know, if
and
I
it can
want to
show you your response to food as well, and it can also be really helpful in telling you when you need to eat next as well.
Yeah, no, it can. I mean, I must admit I've never got to that sort of diagnosis. For me, it's just it's more of a peace of mind thing. I mean, I eat when I know that I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And that is a big change, because you know I used to be able to sit down and eat a meal whether I was hungry or not, quite happily without even giving it a second thought. So you know that's a big change. But nutrition and food, I think, is something that you naturally start questioning as you start whittling down your food choices, and you very quickly come to realize that you know, the boil in the bag rice, or you know, the pre-made pasta sauce, or you know, even I joke about if I'm going to a breakfast, I'll get a you know, an eggs Benedict with salmon or something like that. Sometimes with toast, sometimes not, depending on what they're offering, whether it's sourdough or standard white toast. But invariably, I get the hollandaise on the side, because you know, I can very quickly tell whether it's bidfest or bid food out of a tube, or whether it's something that they've actually gone to some trouble in the kitchen and whisked up. And even then, very moderate on what it is that I
because it'll, even if they whisked it up, it'll still be full of canola oil.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
just to finish up, have you got just a few? I mean, we've probably covered them, but maybe we could just recap on some of, you know, a few of your top strategies for anyone listening to this who thinks, okay, I want to go and make these changes. I want to do what Andrew's done. I want to lose that 20 kgs. I want to look to the future for my health and how I want to age.
I think, you know, probably, again, based, as you say, Sue, on my experience, it would be looking around you and, you know, seeing some of the ailments, you know, amongst our older population. Sometimes it's not as evident as it could be. For example, you know, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, or cardiovascular disease. You know, it's not going to be, you can't really look at somebody and decide that, you know, I don't want to be like that, because they may not be exhibiting any symptoms at all. But just, yeah, have a think about possibly family members, people that you know well. How much weight are they carrying? Educate yourself around the science of nutrition, and good fats, and animal fats versus, you know, seed oils, as you say. That's a big one. We do live in New Zealand, so, you know, grass-fed butter, you know, of the most natural form is readily available on the shelf, albeit a little bit expensive. I guess the real test is to go and benchmark yourself, go to your doctor and talk about metabolic diseases, and express the desire to get some tests to find out where exactly you are in the spectrum of metabolic health. Probably things like blood insulin and insulin resistance is a key one, but also your physical measurements. And then basically whittle down what you eat in a day and come up with a very, very simple, easy diet that you can follow. And don't be scared of the fat boogeyman, cheeses and avocados and the eggs has got too much cholesterol and all that sort of thing. Because realistically, I think if you're losing weight by getting fat adapted, in my case, you're losing weight, things like cholesterol and any fear about hardening of the arteries or anything like that is really secondary, because you may only be on a really strict diet for let's say 2 years. So if that's enough to really get your body weight down and get you into a healthier frame of mind, then I would suggest that you're never going to go back. There's too much to lose. If you've educated yourself properly and really understand the science behind it and what the future could hold, then that's enough to change your thinking. Get yourself a $16 Fitbit from Dick Smith. Again, it's not scientific. You can't you can't rely necessarily on the metrics that it gives you, but it gives you good enough metrics. That's all you need, unless you're fanatical about measuring your own health, which admittedly some people will be. But $16 free delivery, and it certainly motivates you to sort of monitor your steps, to monitor your sleep patterns, and it just gives you that extra bit of confidence that you're on the right track.
And I know we were winding up here, but I just want to touch briefly, because you just reminded me about mental health. Have you noticed an improvement or any change in your mental health at all? Not that I'm suggesting you didn't have good mental health before, but has there been any improvement or change?
I think I'm a pretty much optimistic person at the worst of times. So it takes a lot to sort of change my mood. Certainly COVID and the impacts of COVID over the last 3 years have taken a bit of a toll. But for me personally, it's I can tell immediately, if I eat carbs, then I get that brain fog, and it really sets in fast. And yet if I stick to a standard, the diet that I eat now, which is no, highly processed foods, no seed oils, then I'm alert from the morning to the night, good mental clarity, certainly don't have any mental health issues, and just feel so much lighter and I guess alive, would be the way to describe it, rather than, the opposite, which is, literally feeling heavy, lethargic, really foggy, not, the brain not functioning properly, and seeing no sort of path forward out of that. I guess that's another factor that influences your thinking ongoing, is that, do I want to go back to that feeling that way? And I'd say most people would say they don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, I want to thank you for your time today. I also want to thank you for all the wonderful work you do for me.
Thank you, Sue. My pleasure.
You do all the posting and supporting and helping me get this message out there and sharing information with me, and so I really appreciate that, and thanks for coming and sharing your experience today. I'm sure it'll be really worthwhile for people listening.
Yeah, no, thanks, sir. I'm very, very happy to share my experience, and you know, my hat off to you. You know, it's a very, at times, you know, difficult message to get out there and get people thinking on the same page. It's a, you know, health. You know, I think people put more effort into thinking around, you know, what sort of I don't know, what sort of car they're going to drive for their next vehicle, rather than thinking about, you know, what sort of health measures they can take to, you know, improve themselves and their general outlook. So I know that's not a very good analogy, but it's I think it's reality. You know, modern life gets people busy, and the more you can keep going out there and spreading the health message, the better, because it's really needed.
Oh, thank you. And now Fran can come out of the room.
Yeah, no, I think she snuck out before.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I saw her sneak back in or not. All right. Thanks heaps.
Lovely. Thanks, Sue.